Things are still hot right now with the FBI. We are getting what is billed as national security investigation. It now looks like, wait a minute, government overreach? Could it be? The deep state was weaponizing federal power to target and investigate its political enemies.
On that political list was one of Charlie Kirk's group's Turning Point USA. In other words, Arctic Frost wasn't just a case to politically investigate Trump. It was the vehicle by which partisan FBI agents and Department of Justice prosecutors could achieve their partisan ends and improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus.
So Arctic Frost that he's talking about there, these are unclassified documents that have been released by the FBI. And this began in April of 2022. It went on for about half of the year, but it targeted 92 Republican-linked groups and individuals, including the Republican National Committee, Trump-affiliated PACs, and, as he said there, Turning Point USA, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I want everyone in the audience to think about this in terms of what just happened, right, a week ago today. Charlie Kirk is assassinated in broad daylight. And when you think about the investigation that needs to be underway by the FBI now, right, think about what they did not very long ago. Because this was the FBI and the DOJ working together with other federal agencies to surveil and investigate what? First off, it's wide. It's broad. This is looking at people in multiple states throughout the country. This is looking at basically anyone who was a political opponent. That included many Trump-related organizations. So you're talking about a whole raft of organizations related to the Trump administration, and this is if we can pull that up there. This is a broad investigation, in other words, of political opponents. So not only do we have numerous Trump enterprises listed here, targeted, we also have, guess what? Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is on this document, along with J6 money, whatever the hell that means, right? So, of course, we know everyone going to J6 is targeted. And this means that, these organizations and people are being investigated and can be surveilled by the federal government. This is the kind of widespread activity that was common under the last administration.
So is national security, as what they bill as national security, Chris, is this just actually going through and targeting political enemies again?
Yeah, essentially, unfortunately. Turns out the libertarians were right about some things. But so put this into context, put it into a timeline. This operation was launched in the spring of 2022, which is basically geared up around the time that President Trump was getting ready to come back and win. And President Biden wasn't doing so hot in the polls. And Vice President Kamala Harris wasn't doing so hot in the polls. Look at the 2 years previous to the deep state, essentially. Timothy Thibault, the known anti-Trump FBI agent leading this, 13 field offices going after this. The 2 years before that is when they decided we're going to let the civilians handle this. And they had done a inquisitor's job, an English propaganda version of the Spanish Inquisition's job on this sort of thing. The 2 years previously, after January 6th, the January 6th riot, every single person remotely connected to the Republican Party, from the accountants to the tech guys, were hauled into basements in the Capitol and questioned over and over and over again. And they weren't being questioned about riots. They weren't being questioned about illegal activity. They were being questioned about fundraising, about where they get their money from, over who funds the GOP. This is what the Democratic committees, empowered by Liz Cheney, were going after and digging into. I know multiple people who had absolutely nothing to do with that riot, who weren't even there, who were just hauled in because they were trying to do a fact-finding mission to help sink the GOP. They were searching for crimes. Now look at the 4 years before that. With James Comey, the first half of it, the FBI set about trying to knock down Trump, knock him out, take care of him, saddle him with all kinds of conspiracies, knock off members of his administration, raid different homes of people after they left for the entire 4 years of that administration. So at this point, by 2022, we're on year 6 of FBI tag teaming with Democrats, switching on and off to attack and undermine president, then former president, and now current president. Once again, the once and future president. This whole thing is part of the reason, and you start to see why they were doing it, right? Because when Trump got back into power, he finds it. When Trump got back into power, he found the original documents. When Trump got back into power, he found all of the receipts for all of their misdeeds. And the key to making sure that was never found was Trump either going to prison and never coming back to power, and then maybe some other goofy Republican, some return to normalcy comes back and just allows them to get away with the entire damn thing. That's what they were banking on because they are guilty as sin.
That is such a key point because this is Christopher Wray's FBI, and we can bring in Special Counsel Jack Smith. He's the one who is leading all of this, right? These are the greatest hits of the names on the left. And Matt, we see Tulsi Gabbard right now and others that are like, oh, by the way, we're finding classified documents that are in burn bags, in deep hidden closets within all of these different administrations. So if this is what we found so far, right? And to Chris's point, they didn't want this to happen. They didn't want Trump to win again, but they haven't done, thankfully, a good enough job of getting rid of the actual evidence. And there are still whistleblowers that are coming forward and saying these things are wrong. If this is what we already know, I mean, the level of lawlessness that we will possibly never know about. But the fact that it's the weaponized government that we see over and over and over again.
Yeah, and here's the thing. We can't become numb to this, right? I mean, as Chris said, the damn libertarians are right about something every once in a while. And I mean, the conspiracy theorists were correct. I mean, you have a thoroughly corrupt bureaucratic system. Doesn't mean there's not still great people in that system. There are. There are people, even among the bureaucracy and frontline people, who are still good people who want to do the right thing. But you have to clean out this entire thing. This is the entire apparatus. Again, it's a pirate ship, right? Full of pirates who hate you when you come in on top and try to take it over. You got a clean house. And you have tens of thousands of people who have been trained now for a long time such that they think this is A-OK. They were perfectly willing to go along with investigating 92 Republican-linked groups, as Chris says, 2 years after the election to surveil and investigate political opponents of the sitting president. So this is not something that's acceptable. It's not something that we can allow to be normalized. And it's something that's going to require deep structural reform and getting tens of thousands of people out of there. I don't see any other way around it.
So, Chris, let's bring this back to the audience, everyday people, right? What's the risk for average Americans out there? Because this isn't just DC elites or super PACs or whatever. Like, this is the federalized government of the biggest superpower in the world.
There's a real risk, and we saw it under the Biden administration, and that's when I thought things were getting dangerous. Back when the quaint thinking of things like that being dangerous before open assassinations in broad daylight. But when the FBI started going after normal people, like the dad who defended his child at a pro-life rally, raided his house with guns drawn. When local Pennsylvania attorneys who are left wing as heck, and largely anti-Catholic, refused to actually prosecute, the feds swooped in. When they started putting grandmas in prison for crossing their left wing rubrics or crossing Rubicon, or I don't know, crossing the lines the left had established about where you're allowed to pray, that's when I realized this stuff was getting dangerous. When they started arresting people who had nothing to do with January 6th, which was bad enough, all the arrests they did, all the craziness, all the people they went after. But then when they started just arresting normal Christian Americans from the FBI, that's when I realized, oh, this is not just something that we have to worry about. This is a real threat to this country. It's a real threat to stability. I mean, I learned this in some of the readings that Dr. Peterson assigned me way back in the day, but the incredible danger that exists when one side of the country doesn't feel like the need to respect the laws or abide by them. And then the other side of the country that always did doesn't think the laws are able to protect them anymore. That's when you get to a boiling point as a country. And that's where the FBI and the Democrats were pushing things at 100 miles per hour.
Well, Mike, you're the editor-in-chief. We had on our website, Kash Patel. It's his greatest test. It's an article that you can go see at theblaze.com. And this is going to be a huge deal for Kash Patel and how people are going to view him as the director of the FBI. But can the FBI actually fix itself, right? When we look at how systemic all of these problems are, is it going to be able to just be one man that comes out there and fixes this?
Yeah, look, this is an enormous problem. So no matter who you put in charge of any of these agencies or departments, they have a Herculean task before them. They have to clean out the Aegean stables, to use the ancient Greek. The stables were full of after centuries of use by horses. Hercules changed a river to wash it all away, wash all the filth away. Somehow you have to figure out how to do that. So this is a very difficult thing. Now, in Kash's case, look, I want to say I'm a huge supporter. I'm a huge fan. I wanted him to be confirmed, but I do think that you have critics on the right now looking at some of these agencies saying and pushing what are we going to do? What are we going to do to really change these things, to really reform the structure of these places? And so scrutiny is a good thing. And I think that we owe it to ourselves to have the best people in place. And we need to make sure that everyone is marching to the same drum to actually reform the FBI, because we don't have a lot of time. And it's a really, really serious business that we're discussing right now. So we need to see the plan for how the FBI is going to move forward and change itself so that this stuff never happens again.
Bedford, we'll give you the final
word.
word.
They need to use the agents. They need to use those agents. I was going to jump in there anyways. I'm such a piggy. You need to use the agents who are there, who worked on the inside. Those guys who I know, who were furious after January 20th, January 6th, when every single FBI officer in the entire agency was put on investigating January 6th. Doesn't matter if they're in human trafficking. Doesn't matter if they're organized crime. Doesn't matter if they're after fentanyl. Doesn't matter if they're after all kinds of narcotics or mass murderers. The number one priority for every agent in the entire country was made January 6th. So a lot of those guys didn't actually want to do it. But that's the way the FBI was. And those people who were inside, those career officers who retired in time and told their kids, don't follow in my footsteps, they're the ones that Kash Patel needs, much more than a couple outsiders to come in. They're the ones who can tell you where all the bodies are buried.